Thank you, Jill, for the awesome opening. I'm so excited to be here today, and thank you all for joining us tonight at Cold Smoke. Tonight I want to talk to you about how I got on this journey of running at my fear. But first I'm going to back up a little bit. When I was in my 20s, I had this image of what being a grown-up was like. I had spent all my teen years imagining what being an adult was like. And then I got to my 20s, and I thought it would be like a Friends episode, or maybe today you're watching New Girl or something else. But I thought it was going to be smooth sailing. I was an adult. I was making the decisions. Life would be grand. And on the outside, it might have looked that way at some points. When I was 25, I decided for my 25th birthday, I would buy myself a motorcycle. Now, did I know how to ride a motorcycle? No, but don't let that stop you. I was going to buy myself a motorcycle. So I went to the DMV, and I took the test, and I passed, and I was just getting ready to do my on-bike training. And life, like life does, threw me a curveball. As I was getting ready, the relationship that I had been in for the past 2 years started to fall apart, and I decided I needed to make an exit. So I made a plan. Instead of buying myself a motorcycle for my 25th birthday, I would buy myself a video camera and move to Las Vegas. You might imagine that's a decision a 25-year-old would make now. I didn't think it was weird at the time, but now I think, oh. Anyway, so off I was, loaded up my car. I had planned to move with a friend of mine, and lo and behold, she got in a little trouble before we were on our way, so she had to stay back in Minnesota. But I was off. I had two guys riding along with me, and we were off to Las Vegas to see what adventures Las Vegas had in store for us. Had a place to live. I knew I could find a job. No big deal. So I arrive in Las Vegas and show up at the house where I was supposed to live. And we go in, and the room I was supposed to stay in was still occupied. The guy was in the military. He was leaving, getting transferred. So I had to wait a couple of days. But as he moved out his last box, he looked at me, and I was like, see ya, thanks, I'll be moving into your room. And he said, good luck, and left. And I thought, oh, that's weird. I'm moving in with your roommates. Don't you like your roommates? What's up? So I move into his room, and all was going all right. The two guys who tagged along with me in the car had not had a place to live. So after 2 days on the couch, we shuffled them off somewhere. I didn't know until later they had taken my checkbook with them. But regardless, I was cleaning up that mess, getting everything straight with my bank, and living in this house with these guys who they said they were construction workers. So, I thought all was well. And things kept happening, as you might imagine, for a 25-year-old woman from a small town moving to Las Vegas. First, like I mentioned, the guys who rode with me stole my checkbook. The next thing that happened is I would interview all my friends. So I knew I was in Vegas. I knew I was not able to imagine what people here lived like. So I would interview my friends. Hi, how are you? Do you do drugs? That was my first question for every friend I met. And of course, they all said no, and they all lied. So I was gathering these friends that had not my best interest in mind by any chance. So the second thing that happened, I realized my checkbook was stolen. This girl I met who promised me she was a good girl borrowed my car one night and crashed it. Shortly after that, I realized that the two men who I moved in with as roommates, there was a good reason why the military guy was moving out and said good luck on his way out the door. It was because they were actually drug dealers, and I didn't realize it until I had lived there for a while. So as all of this chaos started piling up and piling up and piling up in my life, I literally didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to live my life that way. I was from a small town and being taken care of by my parents, always fairly stable. And then I had moved into pure chaos. So one day, and then Prince Charming arrived. Montana Mike strode in. He was a friend of a friend. He was wearing a pressed linen shirt, had spiky hair, and he was going to save me. I called my grandma that day and said, "Hey, Grandma, guess what? I met the man of my dreams. I met the man I'm going to marry." I said this as I stood behind Mike, who was in line at the grocery store, one day after meeting him. I don't remember what my grandma said, but I'm sure she was a little skeptical at that point. So here I come moving to Montana, where all dreams are on the table. All I had to do was get this guy to marry me. And I proceeded for 5 years to work on that goal, and not a whole lot else. I just don't know. I don't know. Okay. Yeah.
Things don't work, and then you just sort it all out.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start back in Las Vegas a little bit. Okay. So here I was in Las Vegas. The problems were starting to pile up. And wouldn't you know, in comes Prince Charming. He had spiky hair. He had a pressed linen shirt. He was going to save the day, and I was riding on that white horse out of town. Out of town turned out to be Bozeman, Montana. A pretty good place to land. Yeah, okay. The day that I met him, we had gone to the grocery store to prepare for a barbecue we were both going to. And while we were in line at the store, I hid behind the magazine rack and called my grandma and told her, "I have met the man I'm going to marry." Now, we had some adventures in the years after that. Eventually, we did end up married, and he helped me accomplish a lot of things that I needed in my life. I went back to school because he pushed me to do that. I got an amazing job, which I found out about a lot the way I approached a lot the way I approached my husband. When I saw him, I knew I would marry him. When I saw that job, I knew I would have that job. And like I did most things in my 20s, when I saw something and I knew, I just went out and I took it. It didn't matter what was in my way or what obstacles were in my path. I knew where I was going, and I was going to take advantage of that situation to the best of my ability. And that worked out pretty well on the outside, but on the inside, things were starting to fall apart. And then, as the inside fell apart, the outside started to fall apart. So by the time I was 33, I had married the man of my dreams. I had gotten my undergraduate and my master's degree, and I had gone out and taken the job of my dreams. But when I was 33, all of that fell apart. I lost the job in June, and the marriage was on the rocks all summer. By the end of 2008, I didn't know whether I was coming or going. Earlier that year, in an effort to prove that everything was still okay on the outside, I had done what people do to prove themselves, or what I do to prove myself. I had run the Ridge. After living in Bozeman for 6 years, I still didn't feel like a Bozemanite, and I knew what would fix that. I would run the Ridge and prove that I was a true Bozeman girl. So I did. And during that run, I don't know how many of you have experienced it, but you start out, well, actually, I started out back at home. The night before, I had been training for months. And the night before, I'm a racer. By the time I get to the race, I'm a racer at heart. By the time I get to the race, it's over in my head, because the training is actually the painful part. The race is the fun part. So the night before the Ridge Run, I was celebrating. I had one glass of wine, followed by several more, and who am I kidding? Followed by 4 bottles. Not the greatest way to start out the Ridge Race. So as I rode up in the back of that station wagon, and we bumped along the road up to Fairy Lake, my stomach was doing flip-flops, and I'm not sure if it was because I was nervous about the gun going off or if the wine was still jiggling around in my belly. but I was still going to make this happen. I had to make the outside look good because the inside was a mess. So we all lined up, hundreds of people, right outside Ferry, or right next to Ferry Lake, and off the gun goes. And we're running up the switchbacks, and lo and behold, they have entertainment on this race. It's 20 miles at just under 10,000 feet the whole way. And there's a bagpiper on the switchbacks. And probably to most people, it's kind of entertaining to see a bagpiper. And all I could hear is the forlorn sound of bagpipers, and just knew it might as well be my funeral wake. Like, this was going to be a bad day. And as we go up, I'm still keeping good time. The night before is starting to wear off more and more, which is good and bad. And I get up to Sacagawea, and I'm well under time. Things are still going well. There's a huge mass of people around me. Not out of breath and not feeling great, but I'm making it. Then we run through Ross Pass. Ross Pass is gorgeous. It's soft dirt. The trees shade you from the blazing sun. It's fantastic. It's by far my favorite part of the course. And we get to Ross Pass, grab an orange, cup of water, and up the backside of Bridger. Now, I describe it that way for a reason, because going up the backside of anything is not where I want to be any day. Going up the backside of Bridger was a muddy mess. I was, by this point, well behind most of the pack, and the mud would just allow me to slip way back. I would grab tufts of sticks and grass and whatever things I could get my hands on, and lo and behold, find myself head over heels, falling backwards down the hill with sticks coming out of my hair and getting muddier by the step. Finally, after that arduous trek up Bridger, I got to the top, where thankfully boatloads of people come to rub your back and help you change your shoes and give you water and just buoy your spirits for the second half of the race. I had a group of friends up there. Life was still good. Everything was okay, and off we went up Saddle Peak. Now, I like to liken Saddle Peak. I started out in my 20s, and I want to move back there again. I like to liken Saddle Peak to my 20s. Whereas climbing up the backside of Bridger was like my teens. When I fell, I got muddy and gross, but it was a soft landing. Going up Saddle Peak is like your 20s. When you fall, there's nothing but the rocky world to catch you. So I climbed up Saddle Peak, picking my way along, nothing to protect me from the sun, very few runners as far back as me by this point, and feeling like there was nothing to save me. By the time I got to Baldy, the storms from Livingston were coming over those mountains. I could see that they would be here any second. And for me, it was like where I ended up when I was morally, physically, and spiritually bankrupt when I turned 33. On the top of Baldy, the world of the run and the world and what was my life culminated in one point. I sat there with the aid person handing me water as I hyperventilated and bawled and prayed for her to call a helicopter to come pick me up. Okay. Good. I think I'm going to do a TED Talk on that. Helicopter to come pick me up. Although I was at over 8,000 feet, I was at my bottom. I didn't know how I was possibly going to finish. And if there was any other way off that mountain, I would have gladly accepted it. But there wasn't. On the one hand, I was spiritually and physically bankrupt. On the other hand, the rest of the trail was my most practiced area, and it was all downhill. So off I went. I ran as fast as I could, all the way off Baldy, down the M, and I finished right behind an 85-year-old man and just in front of a 60-year-old woman. So it wasn't the most proud I'd been, but I was just relieved to have gotten to the finish line. Now, if we relay the Bridger Ridge run to the arc of my life, I am now, and Baldy was when I was 33, I'd actually be pretty close to the finish line, which I'm hoping is not true. What I see in my life is that that finish line was yet another beginning for me, because life continues beyond the race, beyond the finish line, beyond even the failure. When I am willing to get out and just take that next step forward, no matter how hard it seems and how impossible the race as a whole is, I can move mountains. I don't know. I'm done. I'm like, I don't know where I am.